Hi everyone. So, what is the ether? This video is mainly for Nethan. Because I really love your videos, Nethan. I find you very accurate and precise, and when I share information, it's usually because I want to help you understand what it is you've encountered. How should I introduce this? Well, we can agree that sound is the foundation, the word. Now, the word in Hungarian might look different than in English. In Hungarian, a verb is a word that expresses action, occurrence, or existence. So it's a phenomenon like a sound, the very foundation of our entire existence. It spreads across dimensions, through hyperspaces, but we're still talking about the word. Why did you believe that the Avramenko plug isn't suitable for creating the phenomenon? After all, you said that a beat frequency is needed, so a base frequency is required, and the meeting of two frequencies, meaning the meeting of two opposing frequencies. This is also called phase conjugation. I've said it many times in the videos that phase conjugation is the essence of the thing. Look, let's see what happens in the Avramenko plug. By the way, we're talking about a patented process, so this is a patented procedure. The Avramenko plug, which you see here in my hand, is patented. It was patented by the Avramenko brothers. With this alone, the phenomenon can already be created. But I need to explain what the phenomenon is that you're seeing, because it should be used with caution. Let me tell you why. Why should you? Let me explain why you should use it carefully. First of all, the base frequency is the square wave at 1 megahertz. So at 1 megahertz, the square wave arrives as a beat frequency. And by the way, you phrased it very well. Thank you. The two opposing diodes, as they are connected facing each other, basically represent two opposing spaces, two opposing times or fields or sounds meeting each other, while the beat frequency is present. You said that with Tesla coils, the beat frequency must be present, and there have to be two fields acting against each other. Then the magic happens. That's right, exactly right. So, your 4 megahertz comes in on one wire. One wire. The beat frequency comes in, spreads out, and meets as a shock wave in two opposing phases because the diodes are close to each other. If the diodes weren't close to each other, this phenomenon wouldn't really occur because the time delay would happen differently down here in the lead. It wouldn't be as precise. Here, if you heat up the LED, the diode, the energy you're talking about is generated, or if you place a conductive object on it. So yes, that means with this device here, under the effect of a square wave, you can generate a signal of any strength you want. I hope that now this is clear. If it's still not clear, then I have to say that when you put together Tesla coils, you're doing the same thing. So when you assemble a bifilar Tesla coil, you have one big coil, one wire is wound in one direction, then you put another one inside, and that one is wound in the opposite direction. This is exactly the same as if you wound one wire onto a single core and then wound another one in the opposite direction. It's exactly the same phenomenon. Besides that, this phenomenon is also created, for example, by a xenon tube. That's the whole topic. If you look at it purely from an energetic perspective, from the energy side, the whole thing is nothing more than triboelectricity or piezoelectricity. It's the same thing, the same phenomenon in itself. It's just that the understanding wasn't deep, that's all. Adding to the ether, whether it exists or not. Yes, it exists. You noticed correctly that that's the verb. That's right. But let's agree on something. This swirls, it can swirl, since you can condense it, right, when it forms in the plasma tube and lights up, or even when it doesn't light up but energy is apparently present. That means you were able to condense it, or you weren't able to condense it. If you can't condense it, then it's present in the form of radiant energy, which you notice because the same phenomenon happens everywhere. That's the reversed energetic phenomenon, when the flow starts from the earth and not towards the earth. What happens? What is this whole ether thing? So, it can be condensed. That's where we left off. So, there are flows occurring in it as well, right? Now, the medium that flows. There, you need at least two completely different, fundamentally distinct media. Flow cannot exist by itself without a medium. Flow only happens in a medium. So, at least two media are needed when it comes to ether. Two completely different media. One of the media is what we experience here and now. This, by itself, is spacetime itself, with everything included, universe, Newtonian, and all. But there is another one, which moves and flows in the opposite direction compared to this. Of course, it's the same reality as this one, only everything in it works in the opposite way. Not the way we're used to here. But if you create a frequency, more specifically, if you create two frequencies and a beat frequency, two frequencies and a beat frequency. What interesting signals these are. So when you create this, not that Egyptian symbols aren't interesting on their own, by the way. But when you create this, you vibrate the very fabric of this reality with the frequency you have set. Of course. But if you create the opposite frequency, if you create the opposite beat with the same beat frequency, then you vibrate the other one as well. With the meeting of the two and the beat frequency, so the bass signal. How else can I put it? With the bass signal and the meeting of the two frequencies, you synchronize two different realities. One passes with reverse time, the other passes with normal time. So, to put it simply, you just have to consider energy directions and energy flow. But with each of these vibrations, with each of these frequencies, you make everything around you vibrate in that environment. Don't take this as meaning just the inside of the material. Don't take this as meaning just radioactive decay. Don't take this as meaning just gravity or just photons, but everything. Everything is included in everything. So when you create radiant energy radiation, every existing type of radiation is included. It works as their opposite. So what we know here, and the way we know it, whether it's a magnetic phenomenon or an electric one, doesn't matter at all. It starts to work as the opposite, with everything included, every phenomenon, every property. But since everything is present at the same time, it has to be filtered. You have to filter it depending on which part you need at the moment. So if you need the energy, the energetic part, filter it for that. If you need the informational part, for example the bioinformational part, filter it for that. These are filters. You don't filter them with resistors, since we're not talking about an electrical phenomenon, but about spatial vibration, space-time vibration. You put it very well. It's like when you pluck a guitar string, and the string starts to vibrate. Yes, except here it's everything. Everything starts to vibrate together, absolutely everything as a whole. And this is what needs to be taken into account. And that's exactly what we consider as well. For 5 years now, we've had various devices. Here's where the commercial comes in. And why? For example, here's this coil, this flat Tesla coil. This is how it works in our device. You can check it out in the Ai-Xtech.eu webshop. It sends out an energy in a certain direction, one that points at you. So, a normal entropic energy, normal time energy, if you will. Your body sends back the part of it that operates in this way. Just as a side note, this isn't really a good thing, because the parts of our body that work like this show signs of decay, so they show signs of reduction, of decline. And as the device sends out this energy, it basically filters and reverses it, so it corrects what's not working properly in the human body. The device reverses this energy packet, this wave packet, and sends it back to the person. This way, the device's operation is specifically filtered to address the individual's particular problems. But it's been working like this for many years. I mentioned the Avramenko brothers, right? Look. Getting back to food and vortices. If you take a straw and it's made of metal and you apply this kind of vibration to it, a pressure difference is created. An ether pressure difference forms between the two ends of the straw, meaning between the input and the output. A pressure difference is created, which generates a vortex, because this is how the ether starts to flow inside and around the straw, creating a funnel-shaped vortex radiation here and here, which the Russians call torsion radiation. This torsion radiation creates vectors. Look, what I'm talking about now is an 80-year-old theory. And since they know how to apply it, they have an 80-year advantage. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians. What I've just explained can be easily understood and tested. This means that if you create normal entropy, in parentheses, electromagnetic radiation, it emits positive time, meaning that everything in its environment starts to degrade and break down. Everything, not just living organisms, but even physical devices as well. That's why your alcohol-based marker always dries out when you place it next to the coil, because it emits a positive time radiation. If we look at it from that perspective, from that point of view, and we don't examine it from the perspective of electricity, and not just from the perspective of sound, but we've put a filter on it. This filter is a filter of time, and if you examine it only from that perspective, you will see that this is really what's happening. However, in the case of radiant energy, how much you can influence time as such depends on the type and nature of the wave, whether you can actually reverse it. Maybe bring a bit of order to the state and move it toward order, or just maintain the current state. This always requires experimentation, a lot of experimentation. The Russians studied the phenomenon with the torsion model together with several universities for 40 years. And I'm not saying this because I'm pro-Russian, but because it seems to me that the truth is on their side. At least from this perspective, that's for sure. And since we're talking about the foundations of reality, I consider the theory the Russians put together a few decades ago to be a pretty strong one. And it's simply fantastic. You just have to use it with insight, and you need to know what you're doing and what effects it has. If you don't know this, you will end up causing trouble for yourself and others because you won't know exactly what effects or forces are at play in the background. This energetic system in itself, so this sound-based theory and sound-based perspective. This alone is the Eye of Horus. I can see that you also noticed the energetics in the Egyptian systems. Yes, of course, it's about the same thing. If you have any questions related to this, any questions about this topic, please feel free to ask them in the next video, and I'll be happy to answer them. If anyone here is interested, or if anyone wants to know what this is, what this reality is, then it's worth asking the Zen Buddhists about this topic, since we're talking about the waves of existence, which spread out in time, as they also carry time itself, existence as such. And since existence came into being, ever since the Word was in the beginning, a lot has happened for us to be here now. And the reason we're here is not a random process. You know this too. Everyone knows this, that chaos and chaotic randomness don't actually exist. It's just that, for us, the phenomenon is incalculable, unpredictable. But that doesn't mean that randomness or chaos actually exist. All there is what we see here now. At least for us, because the whole story is a bit more complete and whole than this. You put it very well yourself that it's our eyes and our brain, and I would add that all of our senses deceive us. Because this here, this reality, is more complete than this. But we are only able to perceive and use this much of it, as much as we are currently capable of, as our state of consciousness and or our technological advancement allows. I see there haven't been any comments, so thank you very much for watching this video. Feel free to share it. Soon, the English dub version will also be ready with AI translation. I might do it in German as well. I don't know yet. We'll see. I'll make it. Basically, the basics are very simple. As you can see, there really isn't anything complicated here, nothing complicated at all. You simply have to consider the propagation of sound, the content of the sound, the message of the sound, and the directions of energy. If you get this and understand what sound is, or you understand what a verb is, then you're in the right place and you can achieve anything if you start from this. Anything you want. We should come up with a better term than health restoration. That's what Chabas is. Okay. What would you say to entropic ordering? How should we label the verb and its directions, its possibilities? How should we label those? We've talked a lot about this with Nathan, and the others have too, about what the right, proper name would be. But since it already has a name, verb, we should come up with something instead of that. Or what's the idea? Or we filter it and name it according to the direction and name of the filtered phenomenon. That's also an option. Actually, there are many options. Well, I wish everyone good thinking. Because health is a very relative thing. Basically, ever since we were born, we've been dying. Life is a terminal illness, isn't it? Well, I couldn't leave out the joke. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching today's episode as well. Subscribe if you haven't already for more useful content like this. And as I said, DC impulse. It's very interesting that with DC, so with the square wave, it really only requires voltage, not much current, for the phenomenon to occur. Well, what does a shock wave need? You don't need amps, right? Well, that's all there is to it. I hope I didn't leave out any important or essential points. I don't know. I hope it's good enough. Yeah, well, of course you can still think about how it swirls and what kind of dynamic movements it has. I think, for example, quantum physics describes this quite well. So quantum physics on its own can be used really well as a tool, up to a certain point. Below and above that, it can't. It's a very good tool. Since quantum physics was created 120 years ago, let's use it when we need to. But we do know that there's more to it than just quantum physics itself. So I hope I've cleared up whether quantum physics exists or not, and whether we should be upset about it or not. It's irrelevant, completely irrelevant. Anyway, I've explained the basics. From here on out, it's up to you. No matter how much I complained, how much I yelled for the past year and a half. Yeah, Nathan, I've been talking about this energy on a daily basis for a year and a half. Every day. Okay, maybe every 3 or 4 days a week, but still, for a year and a half. And you know, in Hungary, people didn't really take this seriously, or they still don't really take it seriously. But now, more and more people are starting to get a feel for what this is about. But still, I hope you'll have a bit more success with this topic in America, because it's tough around here. It's really tough. Oh, right. We also have these wave genetics matrices, but wave genetics as such, as a term, was actually introduced by Dr. Professor Pyotr Petrovich Garjajev, a professor of Russian biological sciences. It's amazing, and what's really amazing about it is that he already understood how torsion fields work, and he was familiar with this phenomenon. He knew how torsion fields operate, since that's how the matrices work, and that's also how his laser functioned. LGN 303 laser with quad wave zero filter. In your opinion, what does the quad wave zero create in optics? I know you don't know. You're not a scientific expert yet. I'm not one either. I just deal with torsion fields on a daily basis for 5 years now. And with energetics, it's been about a year and a half. So, you know, you get access to quite a lot of information this way, especially if you also have the chance to experiment. And you know, the Russians defined torsion fields a very, very long time ago, and they build working devices based on them. A long time ago, for a very long time, Professor Dr. Anatoly Pavlenko Akhimov. I could also recommend his principles because you'll understand much better, more deeply, what this is all about. Much more deeply. But in the end, their conclusion is the same as yours or mine. We're all talking about the same thing. HM. Yeah, okay. Most people only associate it with physical health. You could emphasize that it also heals you mentally. It heals you spiritually too, if you think through the processes. But unfortunately, not everyone is capable of this because their consciousness is trapped within their own boundaries. They can't break out of it. They can't change their perspectives. And yet, this would be incredibly important. And we would feel that we truly are together and belong to each other, and that everyone is one and the same, since we all exist in the same space and the same space-time, and we know what came first, and what developed from that. So, even according to the rules of quantum physics, it's all just one single game. Here, everyone is a player, and it's very interesting that some are set against each other. Shouldn't be, right? It doesn't make sense. That is, if we're looking for meaning. All right, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share it, and see you soon. The English and German versions of this video are also in the works, hopefully, if the internet and the computers cooperate. Bye.